So I do want to start on time and say welcome to all of you. We're very, very pleased that you've been able to join us. And this is the third of our series of special gatherings in honor of sacred time. So we began with a Ramadan session, and we will be having another Ramadan session next week. And I'm going to say this more than once, and I'm also going to send it out in email and other form to you all. Next week is the last Thursday in Ramadan. For those of us in Jerusalem, we will be gathering in person at the Film Centre, the Finnish Centre, combining with the Interfaith Encounter Association for our annual iftar, the dinner to break the fast. And we are going to do a special praying together in Jerusalem, focusing on or featuring just prayer. I'm going to invite anybody who would like to offer a prayer to do so from whichever tradition you come. And I'm hoping that we will have a variety of traditions and a variety of presenters, because as Jean just mentioned, a bridge tragedy in the United States, it doesn't seem to matter where we turn. There are people in need of our prayers. When we started the series on after October 7th, we thought it would be just a few weeks. And as you see, we still need our prayers, perhaps more than ever. So I'm going to be inviting many of you who are regulars and have not yet offered a prayer to do so. And I'm basing the session on something many, many years ago, probably 30 years ago or more. I was invited to be part of a publication which was called Prayers of Inspiring Australians, something like that. And each of us was asked to choose a prayer that was meaningful to us and give a very brief introduction of why we had selected that prayer. And that's what I'm going to ask you to do next week, to select a prayer that is meaningful to you. And again, I want to emphasize this is open to anybody to share a prayer with us, a prayer that's meaningful, and say a couple of sentences before offering it of why you've chosen that particular prayer. And I hope this will be a very powerful gathering next week. So now we're ready to begin this week's session. And as I say, it is the third in the series on holy days. And of course, it's the Easter, it is the Easter session. And two teachers who are currently practicing being in two places at once are our teachers. We're starting with Bishop William Shomali, who is a very strong supporter of the work of Elijah, who's participated with us on many occasions, including in the summer school. And Bishop Shomali, whose bio has just been put into the chat, agreed to talk to me even while he is now at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And his teaching is, we were joking about the fact that he is able to be both praying with us and for us and also teaching us at the same time. So I'm going to invite Tali to present for us Bishop Shomali's teaching.
I would like to mention 5 points, some of them quickly, others with more details. Now, Jesus was a Jew, and he used to celebrate every year the Jewish Pesach, the Jewish Passover. And he should have learned from his parents what is the meaning of Pesach, which is deliverance or freedom from slavery. This was repeated many, many times. So if he lived 33 years and he remembers what happened when he was 7 years old, it means he celebrated at least 25, 26 Passovers. So he knew that the core teaching of Passover is freedom, deliverance, besides the other meaning of God, protection. this is, for me, is given as granted that Jesus had this point in his mind, the importance of freedom for a person. But on this, he built more. Freedom is not only the physical freedom from slavery. It is also the freedom from the slavery of sin and evil. We are slaves of ourselves when we are addicted to do something wrong, either to us or to others, or towards God. So the freedom from evil and from sin, which means, in other words, reconciliation with God, reconciliation with oneself, reconciliation with our neighbor, is important. Now, we celebrate Easter like Jews celebrate Pesach in the spring. This meaning was accumulated, also added, because Pesach is a feast of the spring. And spring means that nature renews itself. After the winter, which is a little bit synonymous of death, comes the spring, which is synonymous of new life. So this new life is a new life with God, new relationship with our neighbor. It's a kind of renewal. So if we want to celebrate Easter spiritually, not only liturgically, we have to accept reconciliation with all its meanings, as we mentioned. This is an important point. Other meanings of Easter, through Easter, Jesus passed over from death to life, because he died, and we believe that on the third day, he raised from the dead. This is for us very important because it implies the notion of resurrection of the body. This body, which dies by natural death. Natural death is not the last word, because we believe in the resurrection of the dead. In the future, this body, which cooperated with our soul in making good things, should participate in the eternal reward. So we believe in the resurrection of the dead. This is based on the fact that Jesus himself, on the third day, he rose from the dead. Another point, a third point, is the fear of death. What is common among human beings is fear of death. The fear of death is like the fear of anything. We die before dying, because fear is a kind of death in itself. This feeling can paralyze us. All our life, we are afraid from death. So knowing that we will raise up from the dead sometime in the future, it gives us tranquility, gives us hope, and liberates us from this fear. Good. Other teaching coming from Easter is forgiveness. How? According to Christianity, Jesus died on the cross. But while on the cross, in his last minutes, he forgave to all those who made him suffer. And this forgiveness is for us and paramount teaching. We cannot speak about Christ without mentioning the forgiveness, unconditional forgiveness. Even before the others ask us excuses and apologies, he gave he asks us to give forgiveness, not to have hatred in our heart, because hatred not only hurts others, but also it hurts ourselves. Jesus forgave on the cross, saying, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they do. We know that those who sent him to death are a small minority in Jerusalem. Not all the people of that time condemned him to death at all. We cannot generalize at all. It is a small minority of his people and of the Romans were the power at that time who made him suffer. But he forgave everyone without any condition, unconditionally. And to be Christian for us is to forgive. Without forgiveness, no one is Christian. And in the daily prayer that we recite, which is called Our Father, it is like Shema Israel that you recite very often. Every Christian has to recite every day, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. And this is important. Forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sinned against us. So any Christian every day, many times in a day, should pray this: forgive us our sins, our trespasses, as we forgive to those who trespass against us. So forgiveness makes me free and also makes others free. This is a very important lesson today. While people make wars in many sides of the globe now, of the planet, there are wars. Wars are fruit of hatred, of bad relationship, of misunderstanding, of greed, of bad intention. So God wants us all to be brothers. And to be brothers is to forgive also. Today, I forgive to my brother. Tomorrow, I need his forgiveness. So it's a mutual need to forgive each other. Number, I don't remember 4 or 5, but I am close. Let us say number 4. Jesus, after his resurrection, the first thing he has done is to appear to one of his disciples. This disciple was Mary of Magdala, a woman. At that time, women were not considered as equal to men. Men only were credible. One woman is not credible. 2 women are more credible, but not as much as men. The fact that Jesus chose to appear to a woman and he asked her to announce his resurrection to his brothers. His brothers are the apostles, the 11. They were 12. Without Judah, they remained 11. So the fact that she was commissioned to inform his disciples means that this woman should be credible. Then he appeared to his disciples to confirm that. But the fact that he chose Mary of Magdala is a lot for that time. He respected women, and all over the gospel, women had a place of predilection, of respect by Jesus himself. Last point is his pedagogical teaching. The same day of his resurrection, he appeared to 2 of his disciples who were depressed, unhappy because of what happened the last 3 days. While they were going to Emmaus, today we call it Emmaus, Nicopolis, near Latrun Monastery, as described by St. Luke in his Gospel, chapter 24, he appeared to 2 of his disciples. One was Cleophas, and we don't know the name of the other. Maybe he was his son. People say his name was Simon. Anyway, the name is not important. During the way, he asked them, what do you talk about? So before giving them teaching, he started by listening. He listened to them about their frustration, their unhappiness, their sadness, their lack of hope. When they finished, they said whatever was in their mind, memory, and conscience, he started to talk to them about what the prophets and all the prophets have said about himself, about his passion, death, and resurrection. He spent with them hours until they believed and recognized him. So we believe that this chapter of Luke means that we as preachers, we as men of faith, we have to teach, to catechize gradually, because people need to be convinced of the truth of our faith, not to impose on them what we believe. This is what Jesus has done in the way for hours, teaching them, answering their questions, and they were very interested in what he mentioned. For us as Christians, this is also a lesson. We cannot impose on others our faith. We have to respect the graduality of faith. Faith is an organism which can grow up, which can grow down, which can fail, which can die. So faith is relation with God, and we have to foster it and to make it grow. And this is what happened on the way to Emmaus. In short words, for us as Christians, we believe that besides the dogmatic teaching coming from Easter, Passover, the Christian Passover, there are also ethical and spiritual meaning and anthropological meaning coming from the facts of Easter. But the most important is the deliverance from sin, which is the worst enemy to man. It is because of sin that there are wars, antagonisms, hatred, greed. So if we are liberated, delivered from our sins and reconciled with God, we start a new spring, a new creation, and a new life. Thank you.
I think you'll agree. I think you'll agree that that was a very beautiful opening to our session on Easter. Very, very moving to hear the bishop speak to us, and very generous of him to spend our time. I then had the privilege of speaking to Reverend Stewart Gillan, who is our current Christian team member for the Praying Together in Jerusalem team, who similarly is engaged in Easter prayers right now and was equally delighted to be able to be in two places at once. So now, Tully, we're going to hear Stewart's teaching, and then we'll hear some responses.
There are two moments that I wanted to draw our attention to. And the first is that moment when Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, as we have the narratives in the Gospels, ask the governor, the Roman governor, Pilate, for Jesus' body. He had, it appears from what the consensus is in New Testament scholarship, no right to be buried because he'd been crucified. And so something special had to happen, and they had to go and they had to ask permission and receive the body. That is the first sign, if you wish, of the dignity or worth or value still of his body. But then we have, elaborate preparations. The women, and they are named, which is exceptional in what is largely a patriarchal corpus of texts, You have Mary Magdalene, Salome, the women who followed him in Galilee, coming down to Jerusalem. And they've got the spices, but they may not proceed because it's the day before Shabbat, and they just can't. They've got to wait. Also, we learn that Arimathea and Nicodemus wrap his body in linen, and they place it in a tomb belonging to Joseph of Arimathea, a tomb that the text says, no one had been laid in before. So it's a sense of the care, elaborate care being taken of the body, which adverts to the dignity even of human bodies. And in a time of great upheaval, war, violent conflict, there are many more bodies than usual. Of course, natural disaster can do that, but you see through the centuries and the millennia the kind of care that is taken. So there's that moment. The second moment is that of resurrection. And the moment at which we learn, as we read, that this risen body of Christ nonetheless still bears the wounds of the cross. If you will, the risen body is a text that can be read back to the violence of crucifixion. And I've always been struck by this. There's a surprise factor. You want to ask, why wouldn't his risen body be healed? And you just start to think why. And you don't want to be casting about for answers or inventing answers, but try to get a sense of why this should be the case. Because with a risen body, why would he be healed? There's the old line from the Hebrew scriptures, risen with healing in his wings. Well, he needs it still himself, we could say. So I think the first thing I want to say is there is a sense in which the incarnation of God, as we believe it, in Jesus Christ, is an ongoing incarnation. The resurrection does not put an end to the incarnation of God in Christ. Another way to say that, Peter, would be to say, when Jesus is risen from the dead and then ascends back to heaven, as we have it at the end of Luke's gospel, he doesn't become a sky god. He doesn't sort of ascend out of sight and be gone forever. There is still an incarnation in this world. And one of the metaphors as it develops in the New Testament for the church of Jesus Christ is that it's the body of Christ in the world, and certainly hurting and broken and in need of healing and cleansing and all of that. It's possible, I think, to take a pastoral approach to the wounds of the risen body. That is to say, Jesus is still someone who is compassionate, and the church as his body in the world must be compassionate to all those who are wounded. At the same time, it is possible to take a prophetic point of departure from the wounds of the risen body. That is to say, not only do we wish to care for the brokenness, to bind up the broken and be about the healing of people within us and physically, but also we want to be asking, why in the world is there so much wounding going on, and for how much of it are we ourselves responsible? How can we do better by each other? Which gets us on to justice and peace and healing and that long, long journey that we're all on together. So the prophetic questions come, as well as the call to pastoral care, I think, from the woundedness of still the resurrection body. Another point to make, perhaps, is that when it comes to Thomas, who's always called doubting Thomas, but he's doubting and then believing Thomas as well. And thank God Thomas is in the text, because we might find ourselves a bit at home with Thomas. Unless I put my finger in the nail prints in his hand and my hand in the wound in his side, I'm not having any of this. And so there's a bit of a verification factor, verification of resurrection. But it would be wrong, I think, to get tangled up in modern scientific questions about a risen body, as if you could put a heat probe in the tomb and see, whether this body had come back to life at a certain point. I don't think that's what the text is about at all. And I think the deeper sense of verification has to do with how this company of men and women then lived their lives. They lived resurrection lives. They lived Easter lives. They lived in hope of the power of life over death and of love over hate and so on, light over darkness. And I think that is the more telling verification, if you will, of resurrection, and in our own time with ourselves, insofar as we can open ourselves to God's Spirit and live such a life. So these are the essential things that are on my mind as I seek to prepare myself for Good Friday, Holy Saturday, and Resurrection Day itself on the Western calendar.
Stewart, you've indicated to me so many fascinating and broad topics. Like one of the topics that really struck me as you were speaking is the intersection between the physical life and the physical body and the spiritual life and the spiritual being of a person. I wonder if you could say a few more words about that from a Christian perspective and what Easter teaches us about that relationship. How significant or important is the physical body, because that's what Jesus' presence represents.
Yes, there's a saying, at least in our circles, that usually of an individual who's annoying people somehow, frustrating them, they'll say, so heavenly minded, they're of no earthly use. And this this can be problematic. There's the other extreme as well to avoid. I have to confess, you know, I grew up in a Western culture. It was on the periphery of North America and Nova Scotia, but still, it was a Western culture. And the sense of the body and physicality, I think I would have, if anyone had asked me and I had the skills and the wit to think about it, I would not have seen matters of the spirit to have had much to do with my body. You know, the kind of spirit is spirit and the body is body, and the sort of interweaving or flowing of the two, I wouldn't really have been able to talk about that. If I had, I might have come to music and the matter of singing, which is physical. You produce your voice. But there's something, we used to do a lot of it. You know, you'd have a campfire or not have a campfire, but you'd have guitars. Guitars were the predominant instrument, acoustic guitars. Various other instruments might have been around. A kazoo might have been hummed, I don't know. But we sang and sang and sang and sang. So I was singing, and there's something, there was a connection that beyond the physical, because you can be together and you're not touching, but you're hearing each other. And there was something about, you know, the words to the songs and so on. We are one in the Spirit, we are one in the Lord, one in the Spirit, one in the Lord, songs like that. So the way music brings us together, I think it's one medium of saying the physical and the spiritual can get going, can get a dynamism working there. But I do have to confess that even now, I feel I have something that I have to overcome in order to be able to say I am spiritual and physical, or dissociated from mental, you know, because we're all head cases in the West. We want it to be rational in a Western sense of rational. I think it's one of the reasons why we're delighted to find from Zen Buddhists this business of koans, you know, what is the sound of one hand clapping? And immediately then we all want to solve it. I don't know if it's for solving, it's for being with, I suppose. I used to think the sound of one hand clapping was find a friend, and between the two of you, your hands will clap. Well, it's all right, but I don't know if that's what really was intended. So I would throw it back to you, Peter, and anyone listening, you know, how for you have spirit and body intersected with Jesus? It's almost like the misunderstandings of Jesus in the early church, called, of course, heresies. You know, he's all God and the physical is just an apparition. He's not really human, or he's all human and the God talk is just God talk. He's just human. And eventually the church decided to say, after a great deal of anguish over centuries, he is all God and all human. Well, how in the world? And it just sits with this mystery. And you know, that it took the church so long to get there, and that we still have trouble with it with regard to Jesus. How could, or what is the divinity within us, and so on. Probably it's for living and seeing in someone's love, rather than thinking about and coming up with a new creed or a new catechism.
You know, you reminded me, one of my great teachers is Professor Tamar Ross, who has managed to several times at several points in my life articulate what is concerning me in a way that I have not been able to do for myself. A very important Jewish philosopher and Orthodox feminist. And Tamar Ross recently was talking about the fact that we try to live in two realms, the realm of spirituality and religion, and the realm of science and what we call rational. And she said for many, many years, in fact, in Jewish life, it's been for at least 1,000 years, Maimonides tried to say, well, the two are absolutely reconcilable. And if you find a conflict, it's because you either don't understand the science or you don't understand the religion, but they're absolutely compatible. She said that she feels that that idea is passé. And that what we have to acknowledge is that we are actually living in two different realms. And the attempt to merge them is false at best, and mistaken at best and deceptive at worst. You know, that we should try to be fully immersed. I think it's what you're saying, actually, fully immersed in our spiritual world and life. And equally fully immersed in the rational scientific world, and not even try to reconcile them, but to live in both simultaneously, to be there. Do you resonate with that? Is that something that
Well, I find it helpful. I don't know if I can fully go down that road, but I find it helpful, you know, to name things accurately. And the physical is because we experience it physically. And yet we have this strong belief that, for example, death, the physical event of death, our bodies dying, is not the end of the journey, that there is a self or an awareness, a life that goes on. And how I reconcile. Yeah, in a way, you have to give it time. You have to journey, and you have to say there will be interim arrivals in my understanding of these things. And then there will be times when I really have to confess in all humility, I don't know. Some things we do know, and you know, that's sort of what we get on with. Yes, there was something that occurred. It'll occur again. Carry on.
Yeah, because I just want to ask you whether Easter is a time when you reflect on these sort of matters more deeply than the rest of the year. Is it a season for you, or is there something else about the season?
Yeah, it's really good that Easter is a season and goes on for those 50 days till we get to Pentecost. So seven sevens in between. It's really important because and again, the woundedness of the risen body refers, you know, everything that was there the day before in terms of what does not make for peace, what does not make for light, the darkness, the fears, the lashings out, all those things, poverty, misogyny, we could name the whole long, terrible list. They're all there. What has changed? It's good that there's a whole season, you know, to try and reflect on light and what it is to be children of light, children whose lives proclaim hope. You get up and carry on every day, that kind of thing. So it is really good that it's a season. There's a double movement in the story itself, and maybe the double movement is what continues. From the road to the cross, we have a story of the resurrection of Lazarus. So here now is a story of resurrection, even on the road to the cross. And then after the cross, we have a risen body that points back to the crucifixion. And so it's not like we're simpletons, foolish people, numpties, to use a Scottish word, at all. It's very telling too in the New Testament when we are called to be able to give an answer for the hope that is in us and rooted in this existence. We give the answer from the pain, And we always say, but it's important to keep saying, our faith, it does not make us immune from the woes, the pain of the world, the degradation, but it strengthens us to get through and to help others through at the same time.
It's really interesting to me to think about these sacred seasons and the fact that this year Ramadan and the Easter period overlap so much. You know, I think it's 2 or 3 weeks of in overlap. And I just wonder whether you feel different in the Easter period. Does something?
I'll tell you, this is what occurred, and I forgot about it, and I shouldn't have forgotten about it. The second time I ever visited Israel and Palestine, it was just after Easter Sunday. And we visited the Episcopalian bishop, who was Suhail Dawani at the time. And we stayed here at the guest house in West Jerusalem, St. Andrews. And there was one day, it was the Sunday after Easter or 2 Sundays after Easter, we went to Raphidia and visited the Church of the Good Shepherd, as it's called, Episcopal Church there. So we rose in the season of Easter, but because they're on the Eastern calendar on the West Bank, we crossed that border point and went back into Lent. We spent the day in Lent. Then we returned across the border and spent our evening and laid our heads down again in the season of Easter. And I remember that was doing my head in, the both and of it, because your sense of time, holy time, spiritual time, liturgical time, and quotidian time, doing this in this country. And it's the same, Friday we're going to spring forward, but on the West Bank, they're not springing forward because they're in Ramadan. And I guess it's better for people fasting to not spring forward until Ramadan is over. And so you've got almost a month of your clock changing daily. And I think this is good because the sense of time, we have a sense of the quality of time, our kairos time, God's time, as well as just the passing of time. So that's the story that comes to mind when you ask me this, do I feel different in Easter? I think, and this could be one's personality or the way experience affects people who are pastors or shepherds. You get that shepherd's eye for what's wrong or the one that's lost. And so you're forever in Lent, whether it's the season of Easter or not, but you're in Lent in hope, if I can put it that way.
Wow, you've certainly given us some deep thoughts and for consideration, and I'm very grateful. Was there any other point that you wanted to make at this point? Because
Well, I don't know. We're just sort of let me go back to Sunday. We had Palm Sunday on the Western calendar there, just Sunday. And last year I had my first Palm Sunday procession from Bethphage, and you walk uphill for quite some time until you get to the top of the Mount of Olives, and then from the east, and then you're coming down again, zigzagging, and you're seeing the old city in front of you after a little while. And I thought, how many people will come this year? And nobody from the West Bank got permits to come, but there was a huge turnout from the churches in Jerusalem. And one of the early signals that it was going to go well, Cardinal Pizzaballa, the Patriarch of the Latin Church, had about a 4-minute address before we left, which concluded with the words, Yalla, Yalla, let's go. And because he was so down to earth and he was just speaking the ways people speak, Yalla, Yalla, I thought this could go. I was not feeling festive like last year. I wasn't waving a palm branch. I wasn't dancing, but I was there, and so were thousands of people. And it felt really good to be there and to do it. It felt hopeful. The church in Gaza was not forgotten, and they had their own observance. And we were also very mindful that Passover is coming. Of course, the gospel narratives tell us, it was Passover and then Jesus at that time prepares to enter Jerusalem. They're interwoven, those narratives, from the beginning. And of course, it's Ramadan. And I was remembering iftar, you introduced me to the word, and then the meal itself. We shared that iftar last year. And experiences like that, it's like they stand there the whole year, and then you can go back and renew the actual event. What is the date for it this year? Do we have a date?
So the iftar meal next Thursday, next Thursday.
Not this Thursday, but next Thursday.
That's right.
I
The
certainly
iftar.
hope to be able to be among you for that.
Well, we will certainly hope to see you there and invite you again. I'm going to use this opportunity, you know, for a plug. That next Thursday, when we are going to gather together for the iftar and praying together in Jerusalem at the Finnish Centre at Film, I'm going to invite everybody who's there who would like to offer a prayer, because we're just going to be in prayer next week. Prayer, because when we started this weekly gathering of praying together in Jerusalem, instead of our monthly, which had been prior to October 7th, we thought that this might be for a short period of time. And it's gone on, and our prayers are so desperately needed.
So our prayers are desperately needed, but tonight we are going to continue just a little bit more with our thinking, our intellect. And I'm going to invite our Rabbi Dr. Alon Goshen-Gottstein, the founder and director of the Elijah Interfaith Institute, to give some reflection on what we've heard from our two Christian teachers. So Tali, if you could bring Alon in and remove me.
Thank you, Peter, for this invitation. I will try to position myself someplace in a moment where there's better conditions, but I'm assuming you want to hear about my Easter experiences based on the questions you just asked, Stewart, which means that I need to tell you about my love of chocolate and the different forms it takes. Would you like that to be the focus of my presentation?
I actually love chocolate and don't mind. However, you will need to stand still because it's too hard for us to watch you move while we.
Okay,
while we
I'm going to improve my position and just I was due to come on in 8 minutes, so give me 3 minutes to get to the position where I had planned to do this from.
Okay.
I'll have better and more appropriate visuals.
For the next 3 minutes, if there is somebody else in the group who would like to make a comment or respond, you'd be most welcome to. Is there someone here who would like to say something at this moment? Floralung, I'm not seing any hands raised. Is anybody interested in perhaps sharing any thoughts on this? We need to. No? So we will watch Alon walk. But if
no, Alon has 30 steps to go.
Okay,
I will
but
tell
if
you, I
anybody
will share with you my
wanted
visuals. As you can see, like a good chocolate-loving rabbi, I'm headed to church for the Thursday service. I'm here in Assisi, and it's been very special to be sharing the experiences of the Franciscans and the community here in Assisi, and that is the context from which I'm speaking now. So I will presently position myself in such a way that I can offer some response. I'm a little concerned. It's a very windy day. If the wind gets the best of us, this could be a problem. Okay, so I'm a little bit protected now. I think I've got a little bit of background visuals. Is this okay? Can you see me?
We can see and hear you. Thank you.
Okay, so going back to Stewart and his experiences, I love the fact that he finally resolved the Zen koan of a single-handed clap. I've been working on this for 40 years, and there it is as a Holy Week gift. So thank you, Stewart, for that. I will share with you some thoughts that came to me as I listened to our two friends address us today. Beginning with William, with Bishop Shomali. Religious meanings are stacked upon one another. He made it a list, but when I listened to him, I realized that really what religious meanings are is a series of interwoven and often interdependent levels of meaning where one meaning moves to the other. He spoke about the natural cycle of the Pesach festival, the spring, going into the Jewish tradition, going into the Christian tradition, going into teaching. So all these different dimensions all feed into one another to create a composite whole. And that positions the believer in a way that there's a range of feelings which either require a journey between those different feelings or alternatively allow one to pick and choose and to identify with what feels more appropriate. It's quite possible that some people may not relate to all meanings at all times or ever, but there's this great wealth of meaning that is stacked in complementary levels. Now, the question that occurred to me as I listened to William was the following. What is the role of interreligious understandings as we stack meanings of feasts upon one another? Now, in the case of Christianity and Judaism, it's clear that part of the meanings that Christianity takes from Judaism are meanings that come from the Jewish understanding itself that are then reread and given a new understanding. Now, the history of Jewish-Christian polemic has been one in which it's a zero-sum game. Either my understanding correct or your understanding is correct. But once we recognize that religious meaning is never a single meaning, but a layered process, then potentially we can legitimate and accept the fact that others are relating to our texts and our festivals and the experience of the founder. As William said, for 25 years, Jesus partook of the Seder. We can relate to those meanings and to the experiences as additional unfolding meaning of something which is ours, but that other people, including other religions, help to bring to light. They may bring it to light to them initially, but the fact is, rather than having to confront or argue, we can accept those meanings as levels of further enhancements of something which is fundamentally ours. To make the point even more fundamental, there's always a tension in the case of Judaism between its particularity and its universality. When is its message for itself and when is its message for others? The fact that Christians take up a Jewish celebration and put new meaning on it that expands it, is that a good or a bad thing? Well, to the extent that it's an either or, a zero-sum game, it's a very bad thing because we don't want to be uprooted and denied our heritage, our meaning, our testimony. But to the extent that it's seen as an extension, then there is the possibility that it extends the meaning to others. And then reciprocally, and here's the interesting question, can other religions find meaning in how another religion lives its faith as part of this process of stacking? So to what extent does the experience of the resurrection of Jesus enhance the sense of spring? To what sense does it potentially give further meaning to Passover, not through the person of Jesus necessarily, but through that whole sense of death coming into life? And to this end, I want to go back to something that Stewart said. Stewart spoke about life and death and light and darkness, which are of course very central in the celebration of Easter night, and how those levels are there. Now, when one hears that initially, it's very nice. These are Christian associations. When one sits down to the Haggadah and one reads at Birkat Gal Yisrael that we thank God for having taken us from slavery to freedom, from death to life, and from darkness to light, then you ask yourself, well, are we talking about the same thing or not? And to what extent is the testimony of Christians who have reconfigured Judaism in that way relevant for Jews to then really go even more deeply into what is properly theirs but may come to light through the other? And therefore, I think the sense of, or let me illustrate this through another point that Stewart mentioned. Stewart spoke, you interrogated Stewart Peter about the whole notion of physicality, the relation between the spiritual and physical, etc. Now, this is of course fundamental to Judaism, the whole sense of the corporeality of worship, and all of Pesach is about eating. This is where Christians get their Eucharist from. In other words, we celebrate God in the most profound way in an act of consuming food. How much more physical can you be? And yet we proclaim this to be a fundamentally spiritual moment. So this relationship of the physical serving as vehicle for the spiritual and the spiritual coming to fuller manifestation through the physical is something common. Now, is this something common to these two religions? Is it in fact something in all religions? These are the kinds of questions that we can ask when we're no longer seeking to compete with one another over an exclusive truth, but to be enriched and for our own understanding to be enhanced, not only by the testimony of how other people live their faith, but also how other people pick up elements from our faith or common fundamentals that are shared between the faiths and what they might mean to them. So I find both these presentations very, very enriching in terms of their potential interreligious significance. And I'm very grateful in particular to Bishop Shomali for having presented us with this list, which in turn allows us to reflect on how religious significance is not a unidimensional matter, but something that is stacked and multi-layered. And with that multi-layering, interreligious understanding becomes one significant contemporary layer. Thank you.
Thank you, Alon. I know that you're, as it were, our Christian friends on your way to prayer. And really, as always, thank you for your response and your analysis. I don't know if you've got another minute or two to see if anybody wants to ask you anything or respond to what you've just said.
Yes, of course. You know, Christians have been waiting 2,000 years. I can't wait another 2 minutes.
Thank you. So this is an opportunity again to see if anybody would like to either join the conversation, make a comment, a response, or ask Alon a particular question. We open the floor and hope that you will raise your voices or share, even if it's just to say how you felt about these now 3 teachings that we've just had. I can see some of your faces, but I can't see somebody indicating that they would like to join. We'd love to hear your voice.
Hello, Alon. Hello, Peter.
Hi, Fazia. Thank you.
Hi,
Lovely
Fazia.
I wanted to ask you, Alon, what you are speaking about. It feels that openness towards learning and deepening, it's only seems to be only possible when we're in these gatherings of people
Fortunately, Fazia's connection doesn't seem to be brilliant.
Okay, let me state her question just based on what I understood, and she can nod her head. Is she with us? Fazia, what I think you want to ask is why do all these things come out only when we're at Elijah or in similar gatherings, and why can't there be more context where these ideas come to light and take on meaning? Was this the question that you wanted to ask?
Yes, it was.
Good. So you see, I'm like your interpreter. And I think the answer really is just where I am. I am right now amongst Christian friends, and I'm not as part of Elijah. And it's a journey. And I know you personally have been on this journey for many, many years, Fazia. And so it's not limited to when you're with people. It's limited when you have opportunities to share life and teaching, either in the academy or in the mosque and church, but in situations of life with people of other religions that you can practice this. I think the situation that is excluded is, on the one hand, just an armchair kind of reading of religions. Though once you have internalized this approach, then even when you're on your own, you can reflect on these questions, having already internalized the approach. Or when you're, and this is the main issue, when you're with co-religionists who are closed-minded and they have no interest, then of course you can't do this. But I don't think it's limited to the kind of gatherings we have here. I think most importantly, it's limited to life opportunities that are friendship-based, potentially worship-based, that allow you to experience the spiritual life of another and to reflect upon this. So in other words, what's the big deal?
But you said friendship. It's really very, very interesting, Alon, that I was in a completely different context, maybe similar to your situation, with Jewish and non-Jewish friends. And when somebody asked, okay, so what we can do, somebody else said, and I should have said it with the Elijah line, but somebody else said, make a friend. Go out and make a friend. Go out and
I just want to see that Fazia is satisfied with this answer. You can do it with a nod of the head. Or you can.
I think her connection lost. She's not in the call at the moment.
I think now she's been absorbed into the absolute then. Okay, I'm going to say goodbye to everyone, and I wish Christians a blessed Easter and Muslims a blessed Ramadan, and Jews that just should hold on with faith. Bye.
Thank you. We have another couple of weeks till Pesach. Thank you. Okay, is there anybody else who would like to make a comment or a contribution? Again, the floor is open if anybody would like to say anything. Tully, can you see, is anybody raising their hand or indicating? Ah, Richard, wonderful. Please unmute yourself.
Is this good?
Yes.
Okay. The question that was just raised of why we are not doing this in other spaces, you know, that was the question that we have experienced in America of the interracial issues that we have had to face and find. Can we build friendships? Can we find commonalities as people? And the issue of having the communications, I was just curious in Israel and Palestine, the kinds of communications that are possible on the family levels between children, and going to school together to know each other. What opportunities naturally can exist to build that commonality and that basis of hope of seeing we're all part of the same family.
Yes, absolutely. It's one of the tragedies of some education systems that make children only interact with the same, with their own. And this is not just here in Israel where we have that problem with even religious and non-religious students not going to the same schools. But I think it's a universal problem. But I do think that as a parent, you have a choice as a parent how much you expose your children and encourage your children to see all other children as brothers, sisters, and friends, or to look at them with suspicion and fear. And I think that we have to look very closely at how we educate our very young children. But thank you for that comment. Thank you, Richard. If anybody else has a comment or a question, you'll be most welcome to share. And if, Tully, you're not seeing anybody, why don't we go back to Stewart and hear his song, which he offered to us. Thanks very much.
Well, we've come to the end of the interview, and you'll carry on with your own prayers, and God being our helper day by day, we shall be praying to the God of life, that we know beauty and joy in this life as well as the opposites. I want then, for my part, to attempt, and please sing, please join in if you know it, Day by Day from Godspell. Day by day, oh dear Lord, three things I pray: to see thee more clearly, love thee more dearly, follow thee more nearly, day by day. Amen.
And of course, that is our challenge, day by day. And I think, Richard, that actually ties in with your comment, day by day, step by step. We have to see things more clearly. I'm going to ask you, Tully, once again, I'm working you hard today. Our Muslim prayer, I haven't seen Rasan come in, and he may have connection problems because he also doesn't seem to be seeing his phone. So there could be a connection problem, but we do have a prayer, a Muslim prayer, from our dear friend, Fadwa, who is going to participate in person next week, but she is also part of my friendship circle, former professor, Fadwa Hirish, and if you could play her prayer, we'll enjoy that. Thank you. I apologize for
Fatma Quraish. I am more or less a retired professor of anthropology and administrative studies. I have been working at Al-Quds University, Beirut University, and some community colleges in Jerusalem. And I am very much dedicated to the cause of peace with the charitable societies here in Jerusalem and within interfaith dialogue in Jerusalem also and worldwide.
Thank you, Fatma. We first met at a conference that was exploring religion and religious renewal, and I'm so pleased to have made your acquaintance. Thank you. Fatma, you are observing Ramadan at the moment. Could you just share with us just a few thoughts about why it's important for you to observe Ramadan?
Ramadan is the month of abstinence of food, but it is also the month of spiritual reunion with God, with people, with relatives, with friends, people we don't have time to share with our time and spiritual communication. So it's time to help needy, elderly, some sick people as much as we can. So the spirit of Ramadan is Ramadan Mubarak to all our Christian, Muslim and Jewish friends. Also, the acts of worship are not only abstinence of food and then doing, what we like after the iftar. So we try to observe what the three religions have ordered us to do is to be peaceful and be kind to each other, to all of mankind. Thank you.
That's a beautiful, thank you so much for sharing that. Unfortunately, the quality of the video is not excellent, but we'll do what we can. And so we've been talking in this series about the dignity of the human person. And one of the lovely things you just said is the importance of friendship in Ramadan. Are there other lessons about the dignity of the human person from Ramadan?
Yes, I think dignity of the human person should be observed not only in Ramadan, but all over here. And in every moment, we try to respect each other and respect ourselves. Hopefully the dignity is observed of dignity of women, of elderly people, of men, of all human beings should be observed. Human rights should be observed. So it's not only during Ramadan or during Pesach or during Passover, it is also during the whole year. So the spirit of observing human dignity should prevail with all of us, hopefully.
Thank you, absolutely. So now it's my great pleasure to invite you to offer a prayer. You may want to offer it first in Arabic and then translate to English, or you may just want to do English, whatever comes to you. We're looking forward to receiving your blessings and your prayer. Thank you.
Well, it is a verse of the Quran. It is about peace, وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. When people when the ignorant try to menace people who are observing, they say peace upon you, and they don't seek revenge. So the spirit of Ramadan is not always to be vengeful and whatever somebody did something to be always spiteful. So the spirit is to be kind and forgiving and peace. So in order for charity to prevail for the three religions, so mercy can be come upon us, all of us. So Ruth also will prevail if we are not vengeful, if somebody did something and not we are spiteful for everything. So وَإِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. So it is peace which we hopefully will observe will come upon all of us for the three religions in Ramadan, and Ramadan Kareem to all of you, and not only to Muslims.
Amen. And thank you so much for that beautiful blessing, which we will share around the world at Praying Together.
So, of course, isn't it terrific how some of the themes that we've just had came up in that earlier discussion with Fadwa, and she will be joining us live next week in Jerusalem. Another person who joins us live frequently is our dear friend Hannah, who is going to offer a Jewish prayer for us. So, Hannah, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Peter, for inviting me. So when you said that forgiveness was going to be one of the subjects, I thought about it, and it was very moving to hear the Bishop and Reverend Gillan talking about Easter. And I thought, in our tradition, one of the main sources of texts of forgiveness is when God shared the 13 attributes of mercy with Moses. You know, after the sin of golden calf, and Moses shattered the tablet, a new covenant was needed between God and the Jewish people, and Moses begged God to share how we get forgiveness. And these are words that I love. We say them repeatedly on Yom Kippur, on the Day of Atonement, but we also use them in other times as well. And some communities use them regularly during the year. And so here we have these words: Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun. God, God, God of mercy. I'm going to sing it in a minute because I love the tune that the Ashkenazi Eastern Europeans use for these words. But there is an idea in the Talmud, the Jewish spiritual teaching, that you should walk in the ways of God. And how does that explicate it? Is it explicated? Walk in the ways of God, Mahu Rachum, as He is merciful, Af Ata Rachum, you be merciful. As He is, I'm pointing to myself, that's ridiculous. As God is compassionate, you be compassionate. As God is full of mercy, you be full of mercy. And that's profound. And I bless us that we will be able to emulate God in whichever ways we are drawn to do so. And this is my prayer for forgiveness, based on the 13 attributes that God taught Moses, of how we can find forgiveness from God. And we don't understand how it works, of course. But nevertheless, it is our Jewish tradition that these are the key with which we can access forgiveness. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, Erech Apayim, V'Rav Chesed V'Emet, Notzer Chesed L'Alafim, Nosei Avon V'Fesha V'Chata'a V'Nakei. Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum V'Chanun, ערך אפיים ורב חסד ואמת, נוצר חסד לאלפים, נושא עוון ופשע, החטאה ונקה. Thank you.
Thank
May
you,
God-
Hannah, as
Yeah,
always.
may God's mercies be inspired to all of us living through this very hard time.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you. Yes, forgiveness is a major theme of Easter, of course, and it's also a theme of Ramadan. And I think it was wonderful that Fadwa emphasized not taking revenge as a major message of Ramadan, and of course not taking revenge. The flip side is learning how to be forgiving. So thank you for tying that all together.
Pleasure.
And a number of people who either are not here in person because of Easter or are leaving early because of Easter preparations. Alon was worried that we wouldn't have any Christians at all on the call. I see Notberger, some of our other Christian friends are here. And of course, our prayer, our Christian prayer today is going to come from Erica, who, again, her beautiful voice. I think we've been blessed by beautiful voices, and she's going to finish off this section of prayers with a Christian prayer. So, Erica.
Thank you, Peter. Peter, did you want to say something about our interchange over email before, when I was trying to reflect on what prayer to choose, and I told Peter, this relates to this whole universal and particular tension that Alon talked about of, we want to try to find things from our traditions that can resonate with others, but also with respect to the particular history of Christians and Jews. I think Christians I tend to be very careful also, I don't want to give offense based on the painful history of Christians often misusing the name of Christ in ways that are deeply violent and harmful. So I was telling Peter that during Holy Week and during these holy times are when I feel sort of most connected to the particular of the tradition, I guess, most, deeply in tune with the particular story of Jesus and the particular events of Holy Week, so that I needed to give some kind of prayer that felt connected to Jesus, but I'm also wary of using, a prayer that would feel offensive or would be misunderstood, right, by people outside of the tradition, and particularly from the history of Jewish-Christian relations. So that's why I asked her, would it be okay if I used the Lord's Prayer? Did you want to say something, Peter, or not?
I just will say that when I was a child at school, going to a public school, and the Lord's Prayer was said every day, the Jewish children were not expected to participate. I experienced some mild anti-Semitism as a child in the public school system, including being sent out of the room while the Merchant of Venice was studied. Very strange when you think about it now. But one of the interesting things was that, so I grew up believing that the Lord's Prayer was offensive until I studied it. And then, as my dear friend and colleague and teacher, Rabbi David Rosen, has said, Jesus was never more Jewish than when he was saying the Lord's Prayer. I think that as a mature person, exactly as you've just reflected, just because something has been weaponized historically doesn't mean it's intrinsically wrong or bad or offensive. And I think that we need to move beyond. And so I'm very grateful to you for selecting this to present to us today. So thank you.
Well, yes, and thank you as well, because as I also said in my email, praying together is also a space then where we can heal together from the painful history, right? And hopefully, Alon so beautifully talked about this, the ways in which we can learn from one another in the spirit of generosity rather than the spirit of competition. Lots of other, like Bishop Shomali talked about the Lord's Prayer. It's a daily prayer. It's said in weekly services before we take communion. It is the prayer that we find in two different places in the gospel that Jesus specifically teaches to the disciples from his Jewish tradition, right? So he's interpreting Jewish tradition. A theme that resonated with me from Reverend Gillan was this idea of Lent in hope, this idea of this prayer for the recognition of the wounds that are ongoing in this life and in these earthly bodies, and we're mindful of the hunger and the suffering in Israel and Gaza and elsewhere, that when we're praying for daily bread, like, this is not a metaphor for some people, and when we're praying to be delivered from evil, we, like, again, this is something that so many people are experiencing. So it's this Lent in hope. I liked that phrase from him. And then, as Hannah said, talking about as God be merciful, so you be merciful. And we find that in this prayer as well, that we pray for forgiveness from God, but also recognizing our accountability to the other, and that we also need to forgive the other. A quick note on the translation. In the Anglophone world, we have lots of different opinions on the best translation for this. What I have here is debts and debtors. It could be sins or sinners. I don't know if there are other disagreements in the other languages, but debts and debtors is most closely related to the Greek text of Matthew, and I think it's most suitable to the musical setting. So that's what I will use, without any intention of offense if anybody's attached to those other words. Let me just make sure that my phone is off. Okay. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever.
Amen. Thank you. Tali, let's have the gallery view to finish off this gathering. So let's see who's still here. As we know, the number of people have had to leave early. I'm so grateful again for your presence and participation. And even when the participation's just been to listen and to be here with us, because we feel your presence, each and every one of you. Thank you again. It's beautiful, international, interreligious, global community of people who feel connected to one another through our holy seasons. And as I think I said at the beginning of this, when we did the Ramadan session, if it's holy time for the Muslim world, that draws down holiness for all of us. It's like somebody once said, do I have to say the traveler's prayer when I'm on a plane if I know somebody else has said it? Because if the plane doesn't go down for them, it's not going down for me either. But if somebody's drawing down the holy time into this world, we're all benefiting from it. And I feel that that's what goes on in these holy seasons, in Ramadan, in the Easter season, for Lent and through to the end of Easter. We're all benefiting from those of you who are drawing down this time, and I thank you. So let's just be in gratitude with one another and in prayer with one another. Please remember that next week I'm inviting, and we will send around the email, and I'll ask you to respond so we make sure we make time on the program. But I hope all of you, even those who are not normally talkative in the sessions, will consider offering a prayer, a short prayer. We're talking about a minute. Just offer a prayer that means something to you, so that we create a body of prayer that hopefully will transform this world. I think that when Father Russ, who had to leave early for his Easter celebrations, when Russ and I and others who were part of that founding team of Praying Together in Jerusalem, we said we believe in prayer, that prayer does something, that it means something. So next week, I'm going to ask you please to offer a prayer. And thank you for being with us this week. Let's just spend one moment before I ask Tully to close the Zoom to just share with each other in silence our presence. You give me strength. Thank you very much, everybody, and look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.